I always believed family was the one thing you could rely on no matter what happened. Friends might leave, relationships might break, but family was supposed to stay. That was the belief I carried with me for most of my life, until the day my father died. My name is Daniel. I grew up in a small, quiet town with my younger brother Marcus. We were only 3 years apart, and from the outside, everyone thought we were inseparable. We went to the same schools, played soccer together after class, and spent most of our childhood helping our father around the house. Our mother passed away when I was 15, and Marcus was 12. After that, it was just the three of us. My father tried his best to raise us alone. He worked long hours, but still made time to sit with us at dinner every night. He believed in hard work, honesty, and loyalty to family. He used to say something to us all the time. "Money can come and go," he would say, pointing at both of us, "but if you lose your family, you lose everything." Back then, I believed every word. Marcus and I handled our grief differently after our mother died. I became more responsible. I helped my father with bills, repairs around the house, and even took a part-time job during my final year of high school. Marcus, on the other hand, became more distant. He wasn't a bad person, he just didn't seem to take life as seriously as I did. While I focused on school and helping my father, Marcus spent more time with friends, going out at night and chasing quick ways to make money. My father noticed the difference too, but he never treated us differently. He always said we would each find our own path eventually. Years passed. I moved to the city after college and started working as an accountant. Marcus stayed in town. He tried different jobs but never stuck with anything for long. Still, we stayed in touch. We called our father every week and visited during holidays. Things weren't perfect, but they weren't bad either. Then, one evening, everything changed. I was finishing a late shift at the office when my phone rang. It was Marcus. That alone surprised me. Marcus rarely called me directly. When I answered, I immediately knew something was wrong. His voice sounded shaky. "Daniel," he said quietly, "you need to come home." My stomach tightened. "Why? What happened?" There was a long pause before he answered, "It's Dad." Those two words were enough to send a chill through my body. "What about him?" I asked quickly. "He collapsed this morning," Marcus said. "The doctor said it was a heart attack." My heart started racing. "Is he okay?" Marcus hesitated. "No," he finally said. "He didn't make it." For a moment, I couldn't speak. The world around me felt like it had suddenly stopped moving. My father had always seemed strong. Even in his 60s, he was active, always fixing things around the house or working in the yard. I never imagined a phone call like this. I drove back to my hometown that same night. The 3-hour drive felt endless. My mind kept replaying memories of my father, his voice, his laugh, the way he used to sit on the porch every evening, watching the sunset. When I arrived at the house early the next morning, Marcus was already there. He looked exhausted, like he hadn't slept at all. We hugged briefly. It felt strange and awkward, like two people who didn't know how to comfort each other. The house felt empty without our father. Everything looked the same, but something important was missing. Over the next few days, we focused on the funeral arrangements. Relatives came from different places, neighbors stopped by to offer condolences, and the house was constantly filled with quiet conversations and heavy emotions. Marcus handled most of the local arrangements since he still lived in town. I was grateful for that. During those days, I noticed something about Marcus. He seemed distracted. Sometimes I would catch him staring at his phone with a serious expression. Other times, he would step outside to take calls and return looking tense. At first, I assumed he was just dealing with stress like the rest of us. The funeral was held on a gray, cloudy afternoon. Standing beside my father's grave was one of the hardest moments of my life. As the coffin was lowered into the ground, I felt like a chapter of my life had officially ended. After the funeral, most of the relatives left town. The house became quiet again. A week later, Marcus and I sat together at the kitchen table where our father used to drink his morning coffee. That's when Marcus brought up the subject neither of us had talked about yet. "The lawyer called," he said. I looked up. "What lawyer?" "Dad's lawyer," Marcus replied. "Apparently, Dad left a will." That didn't surprise me. My father was an organized man. Of course he would have prepared something like that. "When do we see it?" I asked. Marcus shrugged. "Tomorrow morning." The next day we drove to the lawyer's office together. The office was small and quiet, filled with shelves of old files and legal books. The lawyer, Mr. Henderson, was an older man who had known our father for many years. He greeted us politely and asked us to sit down. "I'm sorry for your loss," he said sincerely. "Your father was a good man." We thanked him, and then he opened a folder on his desk. "This document contains your father's final wishes regarding his estate." My father wasn't extremely wealthy, but he had worked hard his entire life. He owned the family house, a small piece of land outside town, and some savings he had built over the years. Mr. Henderson adjusted his glasses and began reading. As stated in the will, the house and land will be transferred to Marcus. I blinked in surprise, but stayed quiet. Marcus had stayed in town, so it made sense that he might inherit the house. The lawyer continued, and the remaining financial assets will also be transferred to Marcus, who will be responsible for managing the estate. I frowned slightly. Something about that sounded strange. Marcus avoided looking at me. Mr. Henderson finished reading the rest of the document and closed the folder. That concludes the main details, he said. The room felt oddly silent. I cleared my throat. Excuse me, I said slowly, but is that everything? The lawyer looked confused. Yes. I glanced at Marcus, who suddenly seemed very interested in the floor. You mean, my father left everything to Marcus? I asked. Mr. Henderson nodded. That is what the document states. I leaned back in my chair, trying to process what I had just heard. My father had always believed in fairness. He had raised us to share and support each other. It didn't make sense that he would leave absolutely everything to just one of us. But at that moment, I pushed the doubt aside. Maybe he had a reason.
Like our stories? Subscribe and share to follow for more.
Maybe Marcus needed the help more than I did, so I forced a small smile and stood up. If that's what Dad wanted, I said quietly, then I respect it. Marcus finally looked up at me. For a brief second, something crossed his face. Not relief, not sadness, something else. Something that, at the time, I couldn't quite understand. But months later, when the truth finally came out, I realized that moment had been the first warning sign that my own brother had been hiding something from me. The drive back from the lawyer's office was quiet. Marcus focused on the road while I stared out the window, watching the familiar streets of our hometown pass by. The same streets we had grown up on, the same streets where my father had spent most of his life working, saving, and building something for his family. I kept telling myself not to overthink things. Maybe my father had simply believed Marcus needed the house more. Marcus had stayed in town while I had moved away and built my own career. It made sense in a practical way. Still, something about it didn't sit right with me. When we got back to the house, Marcus immediately started talking about repairs. The roof needs fixing, he said while walking through the living room, and the fence in the backyard is falling apart. Dad never got around to fixing it. I nodded slowly. Yeah, he mentioned that last time we talked. Marcus walked into the kitchen and opened the refrigerator. I'll probably renovate the place, he continued. Maybe even sell the land later if the price is right. Sell the land? That caught my attention. The land outside town had been my father's pride. It wasn't huge, but he loved it. He used to spend weekends there planting trees and talking about someday building a small cabin. The idea of selling it so quickly felt strange. You're already thinking about selling it? I asked. Marcus shrugged. Maybe. It's just business. I didn't respond. Instead, I grabbed my jacket. I should head back to the city tomorrow, I said. Marcus nodded quickly, almost like he was relieved to hear it. Yeah, you probably have work waiting for you. That night, I stayed in my old bedroom. The room hadn't changed much since I moved out years ago. The same desk, the same posters on the wall, the same creaking floorboards. I lay awake for hours, staring at the ceiling. Something in my mind kept replaying the moment in the lawyer's office. My father had always been very careful about fairness between Marcus and me. Even when we were kids, he made sure everything was shared equally. If one of us got something, the other got something too. So why would he suddenly leave everything to Marcus? The next morning, I packed my things and said goodbye. Marcus walked me to my car. Drive safe, he said. You too, I replied. We shook hands awkwardly before I got in the car. As I drove away, I glanced at the house in the rearview mirror. For the first time in my life, it didn't feel like home anymore. Weeks passed. I went back to my normal routine in the city. Work kept me busy, but every now and then my thoughts drifted back to the will. Marcus and I spoke occasionally on the phone. Our conversations were short and mostly about small things. Then one afternoon, something unexpected happened. I received a phone call from someone I hadn't spoken to in years. It was Mrs. Carter. She had been our neighbor for almost 20 years and was very close to my father. She used to bring us homemade cookies when we were kids and often helped watch Marcus and me when our father worked late. Daniel, she said warmly when I answered. Mrs. Carter, wow, it's been a while. I heard you came to town for the funeral, she said softly. I'm so sorry about your father. Thank you, I replied. We talked for a few minutes, sharing memories about my father. Then, her voice suddenly changed. Daniel, she said carefully, can I ask you something? Of course. Did you and Marcus already read the will? I hesitated. Yes, we did. There was a short silence on the line. That's strange, she murmured. What do you mean? Well, she said slowly, your father came to my house about 6 months before he passed away. My heart skipped a beat. He did? Yes, she replied. He told me he had just finished updating his will. I leaned forward in my chair. What did he say about it? Mrs. Carter sounded confused. He said he finally divided everything equally between you and Marcus. He seemed very proud of that. My chest tightened. Equally? I repeated. Yes, she said. He even joked that you two would argue over who gets the better half. My mind started racing. That's not what the lawyer said, I told her. There was another long pause. Well, Mrs. Carter said slowly, maybe he changed it again later. I just thought it was strange. After we hung up, I sat in silence for several minutes. My father had told Mrs. Carter that the will was divided equally, but the document the lawyer read clearly gave everything to Marcus. Something didn't add up. At first, I tried to convince myself it was just a misunderstanding. Maybe my father had changed his mind afterward, but the doubt had already planted itself in my mind. That evening, I opened my laptop and started looking through old emails from my father. He wasn't very good with technology, but occasionally he would send short messages just to check in. Then I found one that made my stomach twist. It was sent 3 months before he died. The message was simple. Daniel, I met with the lawyer today. Everything is finally settled between you and Marcus. I feel better knowing you boys will both be taken care of. Both, not just one, both. My hand slowly pulled away from the keyboard. The room suddenly felt very quiet. If my father truly planned to leave everything to both of us, then how did the will suddenly end up giving everything to Marcus? There were only 2 possible explanations. Either the lawyer made a mistake, or someone had changed the will, and the only person who had been in town with my father during those final months was Marcus. The thought made my chest tighten. No, Marcus wouldn't do something like that. He was my brother. We grew up together. We shared the same house, the same father, the same memories. But no matter how much I tried to push the idea away, the question kept coming back. What if Marcus knew something I didn't? That night, I barely slept. The next morning, I called the lawyer's office. Mr. Henderson, I said when he answered, I have a question about my father's will. Of course, he replied politely. Did my father ever create another version before the final one? There was a short pause as he checked his files. No, he said. The document we read was the most recent one. I swallowed. And when was it signed? About 2 weeks before your father passed away. 2 weeks. My father had been perfectly healthy at that time. That meant he had personally signed the will that left everything to Marcus. But then, why would he tell Mrs. Carter and email me saying everything was divided equally? The more I thought about it, the less sense it made. Then another thought suddenly hit me. What if my father never signed that version at all? What if someone else had arranged it? My heart started beating faster. I picked up my phone and stared at Marcus's number. For several minutes, I debated whether to call him. Finally, I pressed the button. The phone rang 3 times before he answered. Hey, Daniel. His voice sounded normal, calm. Too calm. Marcus, I said slowly, I need to ask you something. Sure, what's up? I took a deep breath. Did Dad ever talk to you about changing his will before he died? There was a pause on the other end of the line, a long one. Then Marcus finally spoke. Why are you asking that? His voice sounded different now, tense. And in that moment, deep down, I started to realize something that terrified me. My brother wasn't just hiding something. He was afraid that I was finally starting to figure it out. Marcus didn't answer my question right away. The silence on the phone stretched so long that I could hear my own heartbeat. For a moment, I wondered if the call had dropped. Then he finally spoke. Daniel, why are you asking about the will? His voice sounded careful, like he was choosing every word. I leaned back in my chair. Because something doesn't make sense, I said. Mrs. Carter told me Dad said he divided everything between us, and I found an email from him saying the same thing. Another pause. This time, it was shorter. People say a lot of things, Marcus replied. Something about his tone made my stomach tighten. Marcus, I said slowly, did Dad really leave everything to you? He sighed. That's what the will says. That's not what I asked. The silence returned again, heavier than before. Finally, Marcus spoke. Look, Daniel, I'm busy right now. We can talk about this another time. And before I could say anything else, he hung up.
Like our stories? Subscribe and share to follow for more.
I stared at my phone for a long time after the call ended. For the first time in my life, I felt something I had never felt toward my brother before: suspicion. The next few days were restless. I tried focusing on work, but my mind kept returning to the same question: what really happened to my father's will? One evening after work, I sat down and looked again at the email my father had sent me. The more I read it, the clearer it seemed. He believed both of us would be taken care of, not just Marcus, both. Which meant the will Mr. Henderson read in his office didn't match what my father believed he had signed. There was only one way to get answers. I had to go back to town. 2 days later, I took time off work and drove back to the house where Marcus now lived alone. When I pulled into the driveway, his car was already there. The house looked slightly different now. The old fence had been removed and construction materials were stacked near the garage. Marcus was already making changes. I knocked on the door. A moment later, Marcus opened it. He looked surprised to see me. "Daniel, what are you doing here?" "We need to talk," I said. He hesitated, but eventually stepped aside to let me in. The inside of the house felt different too. Some furniture had been moved and several boxes were stacked in the living room. Marcus crossed his arms. "All right," he said. "What's this about?" I didn't waste time. "The will," I said. His expression immediately hardened. "I thought we already talked about that." "No," I replied. "You avoided it." Marcus walked toward the kitchen and poured himself a glass of water. "You're overthinking things," he said. "Am I?" I pulled out my phone and showed him the email from our father. Marcus glanced at it briefly before looking away. "That doesn't mean anything. It means Dad believed we were both in the will." Marcus didn't answer. Instead, he took a long drink of water. "Marcus," I said quietly, "did Dad actually sign that document the lawyer showed us?" His shoulders stiffened. "Of course he did." "Then explain something to me." He slowly turned toward me. "If the will was always meant to give everything to you, why did Dad tell people it was divided between us?" Marcus rubbed his face with his hands. For a moment, he looked tired, really tired. "Daniel," he muttered, "you should just let this go." That was the moment everything inside me snapped. "No," I said firmly. "I'm not letting it go." Marcus stared at me. "Why not? You have your job, your apartment, your life in the city. You're doing fine. That's not the point." "Then what is?" I stepped closer. "The point is whether you lied." Marcus looked away again. His silence told me more than words ever could. My chest felt heavy. "Marcus, what did you do?" For a long time he didn't speak. Then he slowly sat down at the kitchen table. When he finally looked up, his eyes were filled with something I hadn't expected. Guilt. "It wasn't supposed to happen like this," he said quietly. My heart sank. "What do you mean?" Marcus ran a hand through his hair. "You remember how Dad's health started getting worse last year?" I nodded slowly. "He was worried about money," Marcus continued. "Medical bills, repairs on the house, everything." "That doesn't explain anything." "I know," Marcus said. He took a deep breath. "One day, he asked me to drive him to the lawyer's office." My stomach tightened. "He wanted to update the will," Marcus said. "He told me he was splitting everything between us. So why isn't that what the lawyer read?" Marcus looked down at the table. "Because a week later, I went back to the lawyer's office alone. The room suddenly felt colder." "What did you do?" I asked quietly. Marcus didn't answer immediately. Instead, he stared at the floor like a man replaying a terrible memory. "I told Mr. Henderson Dad wanted to change the will again," he said. My chest tightened. "And he believed you?" Marcus nodded slowly. "I said Dad wasn't feeling well and asked me to handle the paperwork. I felt like the air had been knocked out of me." "You forged it," I whispered. Marcus's eyes filled with shame. "I copied his signature from another document." The words hit me like a punch. My own brother had forged our father's will. "You stole everything," I said. Marcus shook his head quickly. "I wasn't thinking clearly. I had debts, Daniel, huge debts. I thought if I got the house and the land, I could sell them and fix everything. You thought you could steal from me and I'd never find out." Marcus slammed his hand on the table. "I didn't think you'd come back asking questions." The room fell silent. We stared at each other across the table. For the first time in my life, the person sitting in front of me didn't feel like my brother. He felt like a stranger. "How long were you planning to keep this secret?" I asked. Marcus didn't answer. That told me everything. I slowly stood up. "Daniel, wait," Marcus said quickly. "We can fix this." "Fix this?" I repeated. Yes, I'll give you half the money when I sell the land. I stared at him in disbelief. You think this is about money? Marcus looked confused. Then what is it about? For a moment, I struggled to find the words. Then I remembered something our father used to say. Money can come and go, but if you lose your family, you lose everything. You didn't just steal an inheritance, I said quietly. You destroyed the last thing Dad cared about, his family. Marcus's face fell. Daniel, please. But I was already walking toward the door. Where are you going? He asked. I stopped before stepping outside. I'm going back to the lawyer, I said. Marcus's face turned pale. You wouldn't. I looked back at him one last time. You forged a legal document, I said. That's fraud. Panic spread across his face. Daniel, if you do that. I opened the door. If I do that, I interrupted, the truth finally comes out. And with that, I left the house. 2 months later, the court officially declared the will invalid. After reviewing the evidence, the judge ruled that the document Marcus submitted had been forged. The original will my father signed months earlier was recovered from the lawyer's archive files. Just like he promised, Mrs. Carter, just like he wrote in his email, everything was divided equally. Marcus was charged with fraud. In the end, he avoided prison but was given a criminal record and ordered to repay legal damages. But the real consequence wasn't the court decision, it was what happened between us. We haven't spoken since that day. Sometimes people ask if I regret reporting him. The truth is, I don't, because the man who betrayed me that day wasn't the brother I grew up with. That brother disappeared the moment greed became more important than family, and in the end, Marcus lost far more than half an inheritance. He lost the only family he had left.